Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Fred, and welcome back to another amazing episode of The Healed Healer. Like we're doing here is we're talking to people who have been through their own journey in life, probably like you and me, people who have actually been through a set of experiences that have led them to become a healer, usually again, or maybe pronounced and announced and re-amplified. Life comes at us and we get to be thrown off track from where we thought we were. And in that process, we find a way to heal. And frequently, on the backside of finding that way to heal, we realize that by utilizing the same tools that helped us heal, we have tools that we can use to help others heal. And we also all realize that when we heal others, we are continually healing ourselves. Elizabeth Kipp is my guest today, and she's no small version of exactly what I'm talking about here. We're going to learn a little bit about Elizabeth's journey and how she became, again, a healer in her life, and what kind of healing she does, actually building on the shoulders of her own health journey. Her journey that has included some of the conditions she actually helped people heal in her life. So, Elizabeth, welcome to the Healed Healer. It's really just a real honor to have you here.
Oh my goodness, Dr. Fred, thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. I'm so glad to be here.
It's really a pleasure to have you. So let's talk a little bit. One of the things I like to ask, it's called my 9-letter question, and be prepared to throw them back on your shoulder, on your heels, your actual heels here, the other kind of heels. That being, it's a simple question that has a total of 9 letters. It's grammatically correct and completely balanced. 3 words, all 3 words have 3 letters in them. That's it. And here is the question. Elizabeth Kipp, who are you?
I don't know.
Right. Also a 9-letter answer, a 9-letter answer. Yes, that's the right kind of answer. And so give us a little clue of what you want us to, focus on. Who is this person that you call Elizabeth Kipp? Who is the person that living in that body? What is it that you either do or be or say or think that
Mm.
has you in fact be Elizabeth Kipp?
Well, I'm on an evolutionary journey, so this moment is not the same as the next moment.
That's for sure. For
Right?
sure correct.
So that's part of it, and the other part is the the part who I don't know who that is the part that's observing Elizabeth Kipp, the personality and the experiences, right? That 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 understanding of the difference between those two, it was really important in my understanding of my chronic pain situation, right?
Right. Okay. I understand. So do you have some answer as to the one that you don't know? Like, in other words, what part of the one that you don't know is different than the part that the one that is your identity that you do
Mhm.
carry out into the world?
The part that I don't know is always watching and um, without judgment. And from a yogic point of view, actually, not science, but yogic science, really, uh, the Elizabeth part of me lives within time, and the part I don't know lives in time and beyond time, that eternal beyond time part. So, and again, a great steadying force for me in kind of understanding the journey that the personality is on and all the experiences that I have. There's this constant part of me that's watching my experience, and um, it's like a steadying force. So I might get my nervous system might get triggered or dysregulated in an experience that Elizabeth is having, but that awareness, that part of me is always steady and grounded. So no matter what happens to the Elizabeth part, that's always there, and that's been very helpful to me. And the Elizabeth part of me has a history, has a story, um, has quirks and beliefs and habits and 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 goals and all the things
Right.
which kind of make up what we would call personality, I suppose. Um, the the awareness part of me is kind of a timeless part of me.
Right. So time conversion or time dissolution or time contraction or time disappearance, the whole idea of the illusions, if you will, of time and space are taken on by the Elizabeth awareness type. There's the Elizabeth grounded in the third dimension here with us. And then there's this other Elizabeth more in the yogic or more in the cosmic or more in the multidimensional, who is really dealing with life at an eternal standpoint, perhaps one where eternity or infinity become real notions of reality over and above what we think about it in the third dimension, in the three-dimensional world. Now, I took some liberty here to expound on what you said. Am I still being consistent with who Elizabeth is as the awareness?
Well, you are, and I would like to say that if I could give you the one of the reasons why I'm so grounded in this space, it's not just like a concept; it's actually a grounding. So
Right.
that's a knowing. Um, I've had 3 near-death experiences, and
Hmm.
I don't really I don't really market myself with that. Some people do. I don't really. That's not really where I. But it's important for this conversation because um, those experiences really took me into a space that was beyond this three-dimensional realm, or
Right.
appear to. That's, I mean, the best that my poor mind can can, you know, there's the brain is a wonderful sensory, 5 sensory, maybe 6 or more sensory organ, but it does have its limitations, 44 terabytes and only certain things it can sense. And so, you know, I bow to that to the genius of the system, and also to the not knowing, to the mystery, the things that it might not be able to handle. And infinity is something my poor mind just doesn't even know how to like
No,
measure.
your poor mind has no real access to it experientially. At least your poor unaware mind, or your poor ground in the ego mind. This is
Yes,
the
that's
the
right.
one who's here with us, and the one who has all those goals and standings and ideas and fears and all of those things. Right. So, do you care to speak to any of the near death experiences and the possible impact that one or all three has had on who you have become?
Well, the first one, they were all the same, which was very, from a sciencey point of view. When I got back to this side of the veil, I was like, that's really interesting, right? I'm breaking down the data, right? So that was kind of fun. Um, when I had that experience the first time, and all the others were the same, so I'll just tell you that one. I found myself in um, in a space that was kind of dark, and had some dimension from in front of me to be to and to in front of me farther away, like it had dimensional that way, not out
A
wide,
forwardness, maybe.
forward and back. And there was there was a being sitting in the front, and I was speaking with this being, and there were beings behind this being. I didn't recognize that being, but there were beings behind this being, and I couldn't see their faces. But it was so interesting because I recognized them. I knew all these people, and that was like, okay, that was,
Mhm.
and the feeling of knowing the people was kind of a full body experience.
Right.
The other thing I noticed was that I felt was the love in that space was unearthly. I haven't experienced anything even close. I mean, and I have a beautiful, loving people around me, and all kinds of people that, yeah, it's a whole other level of the love experience, but kind of, again, a full spectrum of that. So that was really really powerful and profound to experience that actually existed in anywhere, right, for me. And so I'm facing this being, and I look at this being, and I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman or what, but it was just a being. And I said, um, I haven't completed my mission. I have to go back.
Interesting.
And I came back. And that happened 3 times.
And was it from a health condition or a car accident, or what were the things
Uh,
that were going on that threatened your body?
I was in surgery for 2 of them, and the third one I was in treatment. And they gave me a cocktail to get me off all the medication I'd been on, and as soon as those drugs hit my system, my heart stopped.
Okay.
And I was really lucky. A nurse happened to walk in the room when I started to fall, and he caught me and, took care of me right away. But I had that experience. That was interesting.
All right. And the experience itself repeated itself the other 2 times. Very similar.
Very similar. Yeah. And the third time it was kind of interesting because I knew that my mission was my son and my husband, that I needed to be there for them. The third time, I didn't know what my mission was, but I knew I hadn't completed it. That was
Right.
kind of fun.
Very
Because
beautiful.
my son was grown, and my husband was kind of grown too. He did that. There wasn't a need like that anymore. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. So there had been enough time that it elapsed that it wasn't clear that either your son or your husband had an immediate acute need, but you knew that your mission was anyways to come back and that it was one to be completed.
Yes. Yeah.
Understood. That's really great. And so how can you draw the connection between these experiences, as you did bring it up, between these experiences and the awareness of, the Elizabeth awareness being the one, like
Mhm.
how does these experiences contribute to what you now know to be that expansive time bending Elizabeth awareness woman, or Elizabeth awareness being that is different than the Elizabeth, three-dimensional being?
I think it calmed my nervous system down enough around the concept of death. I had a fear of death. It calmed that enough for me to see the distinction.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool. And I saw in your bio, the bio that you presented me, that you have, let me check this real quick. I think what you said, that you have a diverse background in plant sciences, agriculture, ecology, environmental studies, and remote sensing. And of course, you were doing applied research in remote sensing as early as 1979 to 1982 over there in Kansas, I assume in Lawrence, where you are from. And the idea here that I have is about the plant sciences. Some of what you're describing appears to be along the lines, at least similar enough to draw the question for me and probably some of our listeners about its comparison to plant medicine journeys that some of our listeners have probably taken. Is this similar enough to that? Is there some crossover or some congruence between a plant medicine journey and what you're talking about with death and the near-death experience that you have just described?
Well, that's a little bit outside my experience. When I was in my early 20s, um, experimented with psilocybin and uh, peyote mushrooms. Um, those were also, but it was not supervised. It wasn't like with a shaman,
Right,
right?
right.
It was really more
More
recreational.
recreational, right?
But it didn't matter because it really expanded my awareness of the three-dimensional world that I was in without that. And um, it didn't last, it didn't stick. But I remembered that I had an experience like that, and it definitely um, allowed me to understand that that this three-dimensional experience that I'm having, and I'm a practicing yogi, so that it's a yoga of awareness is, kind of expands all that. But this three-dimensional experience that we're having, I knew it was limited, and I did study neurophysiology back at that time, so I understood a little bit about the brain and its limitations, and how it can, it's got all these variables, and so I knew that there was a lot of mystery, and as a somebody who studied in science and always needed, everybody always wanted an answer. I I was really grateful to know that, there's going to be some things I'm not going to know the answer to, and that's okay.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I love that. And that's, in the conventional educational system, we become addicted to finding the answers. And without the answers, we don't get to advance to the next level. Like you need to have answers and you need to have that green check mark instead of the red X so many times on the papers, whether you're in Lawrence or you're in Ann Arbor or you're at Detroit, where the two schools that I went to, as well as Chicago. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're in a conventional Western based educational system, getting the right answer is rewarded at a very high level rather than just cascading and sequencing question after question, the inquiry that life really presents us with, which doesn't necessarily get you the higher grades in school or the capacity to advance. So we become addicted to answers. And I think you're pointing a finger to that.
Yes, and I was just talking to a friend the other day. I have this expression that I use: everything on the computer is magic. When I don't understand it, it's magic until it isn't. Once I
Okay.
understand it, it's not magic anymore.
Right.
And that's just kind of the way I kind of put it. And what I noticed many years ago when I got into the computer world, um, and I would come up against a barrier where it's like, I don't know how to do this. It's not working, right, kind of thing. And I was coding back in 78, 79. So I was a coder for a while. Um,
Cobalt, Fortran, those are the days
all
back in that.
all
Yeah.
that, yeah, all that,
Very much.
right?
Yep. Yep.
And uh, so um, what I discovered was my nervous system got very restless when I couldn't get the tech to work. All right. It
Right.
wouldn't work the way I was
I
thinking.
understand completely.
And and I was like, what is that? And what I realized was that was the part of me that is this addicted to the answer part.
Exactly.
And it feels that there's a and it's common in the inside. It's like this is parts work, right? Towards this part work. Um, on the inside, I'm saying, you're giving me an equation I can't answer. That doesn't
Right.
have an answer. That's so it's having like a tantrum because it can't answer the
Right.
question.
Right.
And I really was able to see that, so that when that happens now, it doesn't happen as much. Um, I don't have as much of a charge, and I don't get so, I don't sweat or any of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. No, I remember the days as well. I was the only computer in Michigan was over there in Ann Arbor, and so probably you were at the only one in Kansas. And we used to do those punch cards and batch jobs and turn them in and see if they worked. And if they didn't work, we had to go find the card that was malfunctioning and work the program again forward from that card, etc. So, and it was really discombobulating. It really was destabilizing. So I'm going to ask you, we're going to take a little leap here in your career and who you are and see if you can draw a nice thread between what we're talking about here and the discombobulation of really, there's a piece of emotional pain that you're talking about, a dysfunction, an imbalance that we're pointing to, as well as the reproduction of balance out there in the infinite or in the eternal that we just talked about inside of like, um, inside of the awareness, if you will, inside of the post near death experiences or the plant journeys that allows for some sort of settling in the multidimensional world in a more real way than the limiting world of the three-dimensional world. you became someone who walks people through chronic pain. And you describe pain in a very vast way, multiple different, not just physical pain, but multiple kinds of pain. And you're a specialist in both pain management and stress management. Can you put some of the things that I have sloppily put in front of you in the last few minutes together and help me see how all this became who Elizabeth is as a healer in the pain management and stress management areas of life?
Sure. So, what an interesting question and a
Thank
great
you.
comparison. Um, so, uh, so chronic pain, just, so we define it as I define it, as it's kind of generally defined, um, is any pain that's felt 15 days out of 30 for 3 months or more. Any pain, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, any pain. The brain can't tell the difference between a broken bone and a broken heart. It all sends the same signal to the brain. It hurts. So, kind of, that's a little foundation for us to talk about. So remember, we're a multi-dimensional being, right, living in these two worlds, the finite and the infinite, at like the same time. In the chronic pain experience, what happened there was my ego, really. And I, it's just, we all do it. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm I felt unsafe. I felt unsafe, and my chronic pain really goes back to unresolved trauma as a child, that kind of barreled on top of itself. Um, and I also had a structural weakness in the fifth lumbar from a break, and needed surgery. But the surgery, the pain got worse every time I had surgery to correct. So um, that was, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the pain. So I had this attitude: pain is bad. Now that's the ego coming in and like making a
Of course.
label. Pain is
Yeah.
bad. But I had a lot of conditioning around that. When I was a child, and kids bumped themselves or something happened, the adults rushed in,
Yeah.
to like stop the pain as soon as possible. So what's the subtext there? Pain is bad. We're at war with pain. So, but it took me, if it took me a while to get there, to understand that was conditioning, right? That I was acting under conditioning. I became identified with my pain. It just became this such a vast, overwhelming, seemingly overwhelming experience of my nervous system. I never felt safe. My stress response was out of balance. I'm always looking for the next threat. I mean, you can't think straight. You really can't. It's difficult to see. It's not impossible, but it's difficult to see consciousness in that space. The world becomes very small and contracted around the chronic pain experience when you identify with it. The key for me was realizing I'm not my pain. I'm having an experience of pain, but it's not who I am. And that distinction was a huge healing moment for me. I hope I made sense when I just
Yeah,
said.
I think so. Yeah, you're not your pain. The condition. So it's not the same thing when you are experiencing pain. It doesn't mean that you are that pain. I think that's what you're trying to say.
That's correct. Yeah, and it's like I'm having an emotion, but it's not who I am. I
Exactly.
have thoughts in my mind, but it's not who I am. These things don't define who I truly am, which is why we're having this conversation about the the awareness part of me, the part I don't know what that is exactly, and this other part, the personality. Yeah.
Exactly. Very cool. Okay, so you do treat people. You are someone who people come to when they are experiencing this thing called protracted or chronic pain. Is that right?
Well, I'm not a therapist and I'm not a doctor, but I'm a fabulous coach in that
Okay.
space for like once the patient has seen the doctor and gone into a pain management program, and then maybe it's in physical therapy or something like that, or maybe they need to learn meditation or whatever it is, that's where I shine. I'm a really good support there because I know all that stuff, and I can I can see the blocks that they come up with. Oh, I can't do that because of whatever, right? That doesn't work with me. And that's good because they're sitting across from somebody who's been through so many of her own blocks that and can see them for who they are, right? Which is a huge plus in
Yeah.
that space.
Beautiful. And Elizabeth, you work online, you work on the telephone, and you work in person as well. One to one and group, it sounds like, is
Yep.
you are almost any different area. And you do something which I was really intrigued by, something called trauma informed yoga. Can you give us a little clue what that looks like? You had called yourself a yogi a few times in this conversation. So help me understand, what is trauma informed yoga?
So so trauma informed yoga is yoga with a certain lens where we're recognizing um, that the person in front of us, or the people in front of me in the room, have unresolved trauma in the system, and we want to bring practices that gently move that unresolved trauma out of the tissues. We say Bessel van der Kolk coined this: the issues are in the tissues. So yoga helps us. Qigong is another one. I mean, there's other ways that these tapping can help it too. EFT tapping can help. Yoga and trauma informed yoga. Now, why trauma informed? Um, there are certain things that we do in a trauma informed space that we would not do in a that we sorry, there are certain things we do in regular yoga that we would not do in a trauma informed class. For instance, I don't do a breath hold in trauma informed yoga.
Mm,
The reason is because holding the breath can mimic that freeze, shut down,
that makes sense.
right? So we don't do that. Like later along their journey, that can be very regulating to start doing like box breathing, which is a breath hold on the inhale and a breath hold on the exhale, but not in the beginning. We got to
Interesting.
get the nervous system, regulate. We got to get the person feeling safe in their own body and trusting themselves before we can kind of. That's an example, right? No breath hold. Another thing is if it's if it's in a room with a group, we don't line people up front to back. We go in a circle, so nobody has to worry about what's behind them, right? Another thing is we don't stare directly at their eyes. We might make eye contact, but then look away, so because that could be seen as a threat. So there's like lots of little. Also, the tone of voice that we use is a gentle, kind of musical, methodical, but not monotone. So we're very careful about uh, kind of the whole sensory
Right.
environment that we're
Details.
providing.
Yes.
Yeah, oh yeah, and we're constantly really the first thing I do when I see a new person or a class comes in is I assess the nervous system, like
Yeah.
everybody's nervous system, what's happening there, and then I adjust the class to that because if they're all activated and dysregulated, we need to bring the temperature down and get them feeling safe before we can learn anything.
Very interesting. I love that. And thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful and it makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that it's very effective in dealing with people. Now, another thing you talk about is ancestral clearing. Ancestral clearing. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I've done some work and spoken to people who do constellation. Perhaps that's similar to that. What is ancestral clearing?
Yeah, it's a cousin. It's not the same, but it's a cousin. I would say that because I've done that work, and this process is different, but they are related. In that, we're recognizing that we come into this life with information from our ancestors, just from the ancestors. We come in with information, and some of it is um, helpful, and some of it is not so helpful. And John Newton of healthbeyondbelief.com developed this method. He's registered, it's registered and trademarked under his name. So it's a process. He has about 10 different techniques that he uses. And it kind of depends on what's happening in the session as to which thing I pull out.
Right.
But we're working epigenetically. So we're working with. Do you want me to kind of define that a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. That'd be good.
We're working with the part of the. If you were to say, like, look at a computer, the DNA would be the hardware of the computer, and the epigenetic part would be the software, the environment, the programming that we're putting in.
Okay.
And the computer acts certain ways depending on what that software is. So
right.
We're really doing the same thing with the human experience.
Okay.
In ancestral clearing, it is cosmic. We're actually using creator energy. We call on creator energy, source of all it is, God, whatever you want to call that. We actually call on it to help us release that which no longer serves us. It's a very powerful process. The practice as a practitioner, my job, which is great, why I have a yoga practice, is very helpful here. My job is really to get out of the way, and creators doing the work. Right? That's a huge, very humbling space to be in. Also very powerful. I have some clients that come to me. I've never had a client come to me for ancestor clearing that brought a problem that this process couldn't handle, which I think as a scientist is like, that's amazing, right? That's really, that's quite remarkable. But I have had some clients that have come to me with, like, something that I'm like, my mind has no idea how to like heal that. No idea. But I'm not the one that's doing it. All I have to do is work the process.
Beautiful.
And the creator energy, and the client needs to have needs to want the work, want the help, and the process takes care of itself. It's quite lovely. It's quite lovely.
That's fantastic. Now, I assume some of this is included in your book, which you are here talking about, The Way Through Chronic Pain, Tools to Reclaim Your Healing Power. Is that book available at Amazon, or how would our listeners actually get a tap into that book? Where would they find that book?
You can get a copy on Amazon, or you can get an autographed copy from me on my website.
Okay. And what is the name of your website in case people want to follow you or learn from you or grow with you or call you or get an appointment or a discovery call with you? How would people do that?
Yeah, it's Elizabeth-Kipp.com. You got to put a dash in between my first and last name. Because ElizabethKipp.com is a web designer and a photographer, and she's amazing, but she's not me. So Elizabeth-Kipp with a hyphen, Kipp.com. I'm all over social media. You can find me. You can contact me through my website. I got lots of products, tons of free resources there. And you can find me, you can message me on social media as well.
Okay, that's beautiful. So find you on social media, or Elizabeth-Kipp.com is the website where you can get a lot of freebies, or you can get a lot of your material, learn a little bit more of what you're up to, things that maybe you weren't even able to address yet in this conversation. Is that right?
That's right.
All right, Elizabeth, it's been a deep pleasure. Is there anything you want to pass along to our listeners? One final thought, perhaps, thing that you want to say about either the conversation that we've already had, or something that you really you think most people or everyone should know about what you stand for or what's important to you?
Thank you for the question. The greatest healer lives within you.
Beautiful.
It's not out there in the doctor or the nurse or the modality. It's in here, and the doctor and the nurse and the modalities and people like me and you, we guide people to their own healing. It's inside.
That's fantastic. Love that, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for reminding us of what we might already know from previous ancestry. And that is, the greatest healer lives right here with me. And I truly appreciate that. And right there with you, the listener. Elizabeth, thank you so much for giving us your presence and taking your time today to be on the Healed Healer. It's really been a beautiful ride. And I truly appreciate you being on the call and being with us and sharing your expertise and your wisdom. Thank you so much. And I trust my listeners will also enjoy this conversation and approach you and actually look at your website and see what you can do to help them or what they can learn by following you and learning from your journey what it's like to have become a healed healer. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.